Hello again. I'm listening to the wireless. This is the mass communication 1920s style. One of the earliest of radios, a crystal set, or a cat's whisker as it was also known, broadcasting the programs of 2LO and 2BD and all the other regional stations of what was then called the British Broadcasting Company. It's a far cry from the sophisticated, transistorized, high-powered FM and AM devices of today. Although in its time this must have been fairly sophisticated too. There's really not very much to it by present-day standards. There was a tuner and just two wires apart from my headphones. There was this wire, which was the aerial and along which the signal came from the transmitter, and this wire, which was simply an earth, which was fixed to a water pipe in your house or something of the sort. And no electricity, it wasn't plugged into anything, and it had no batteries. All the power came in through the aerial and was detected by a crystal in here, hence the crystal set, which was touched by a very fine wire which was called the cat's whisker. And it produced the signal that was radio in the 1920s. Yes, certainly a memory from the past. Well, now let's tune in to more recent memories, evoked by some fascinating film footage of the way it was. And this week, we're going to be looking at a new Aberdour Jubilee celebration and a hospital sports day, both in the 1940s. We'll also see how the 1953 coronation was marked in Aberdour, and there's a film record of an Aberdeen hosiery firm in the 1960s. Watching with me are our regular contributors, Janet McBain, the curator of the Scottish Film Archive, and Bernard Balfour with that secret ingredient that only personal experience can provide. Yes, Bernard? Bernard, what's your personal experience of radio? Because in the early years of this century, it must have revolutionized entertainment.
Well, Jerry, it's funny you use the word entertainment because the head of the BBC was in fact John Reith, born in Stonehaven, 50 miles from Aberdeen. And he said it's not entertainment, it's for spreading or broadcasting knowledge. And that's what really it brought to the whole population. Not only entertainment, but knowledge as well.
And it must have made a tremendous difference to most people.
Well, it made a difference to speech. Local dialect started disappearing from the radio.
Yeah. Janet, we've also got film, as I said, of a lot of special occasions, jubilees, sports days. That was the kind of thing that people took their cameras out to, wasn't it?
I think, yes, largely because not only their own friends and family would be there, but everybody in the village or the town. So they would have great fun showing the films in the months afterwards at birthday parties or Christmas. And of course everybody in the community would be there, so everybody would recognise themselves.
Yeah. With me also for this particular programme is Grace Taylor from New Aberdour, which is the location of our first piece of film. Grace, a jubilee in New Aberdour in 1949. A jubilee of what?
The building of the hall, 60 years since the hall was first started to be built.
And what was that hall built for?
Just for the community, for the concerts or dances or whatever.
Now we see in this film the local friendly society. Tell me about them. Who were they?
Well, the New Aberdour Juvenile Friendly Society was formed originally in 1829. It was a kind of society to promote good behaviour in boys, strictly for the boys to begin with. No swearing, and they met once a year. They paid 9p to join, and then after that 1 shilling and 1 penny. They originally, the penny went to the band, which played there, and the shillings mounted up over the years, and the boys got them back to buy the tools of their trade.
And the Friendly Society, has it died out, or is it still in existence in New Aberdour?
No, it has really died out.
Any famous names in that Friendly Society over the years?
Well, Sandy Gall's dad was a member.
Really?
Yes.
Sandy Gall's dad, what trade would he have had?
A mason.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Look at this film with me, if you would, Grace, of the New Aberdour Diamond Jubilee, it would have been,
yes,
of the building of the local hall. And tell me what we're seeing, please. Thursday, the 15th of September, 1949. Who are the girls?
Well, they're Jean Scott, Bunty Rennie, and this is the twins, the Garrick twins, and their sister Isabel. Their dad was the headmaster at the time.
All still in the area, the girls?
Yes, they're all round about. This is going through the village, the car. with Walter Burney in it. He was the son of the minister who really, it was his brainchild to build this hall.
And this is the Juvenile Friendly Society that we're seeing here, is it?
Yes, with the sashes on.
Uh-huh.
And this is him coming back to the hall. There's the policeman at the time, Mr. Robertson.
And the banners would have been part of the
society,
yes.
yes.
Who's the little old lady?
She was the oldest inhabitant in the village. Elsie Gerard was her name.
Accompanied by who?
Sir George Ogilvie Forbes. His dad was originally invited to open the hall at the beginning in case Lord Aberdeen couldn't make it, but Lord Aberdeen did make it. That's George Rollo that's putting the sword back into the shield.
And the banners and the sashes of the
Bill
Juvenile
Cato
Friendly Society.
And Wally Scott.
And would this Jubilee celebration have gone on all day?
Yes.
What form would it have taken? What did they do?
Well, they'd have had the walk in the morning, and then in the afternoon would have gone to the hall to buy up all the goods.
This is the bazaar.
Just like a sale, yes.
Uh-huh.
There's Walter Burney.
Fresh eggs.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of bargains, presumably, in the bazaar.
Oh, yes. Farmers gave a lot, really.
And where would the money have gone from that was raised in this bazaar?
Or maybe to repaint the hall. Or I mean, there's new kitchens being put in, and they keep renovating it and updating it.
And that hall's still very much in use?
Yes, very much so.
Very much part of the community?
Yes.
Do we recognise anybody there?
Yes, Mrs. Strachan. Not sure of the men there.
Pausing for an ice cream?
And Jeannie Sutherland, eating an ice cream.
What would they have bought by the sackful?
Potatoes.
Ah, right.
There's our minister with his pipe. And there's the postie. There's the minister again, Mr. Adams.
He bought a sackful of potatoes, did he?
Yes, uh-huh.
Wonder what that was. A punnet of strawberries, maybe?
There's Alec Bell.
A lot of fruit and veg?
Yes.
Uh-huh.
And baking, probably. Home bakes.
And the head squares and the turbans,
yes,
very much part
very
of the women's
yes.
fashion of the time.
Yes.
Do you appear in this, Grace?
Mm-hmm. Briefly, yes.
Oh, right. Point yourself out to us when it comes along. Obviously examining their, or discussing their purchases.
Mm-hmm.
And the style of spectacles very much part of the period as well. The entire community would have got themselves involved.
Yes, including Pennan and Tyree area as well.
Uh-huh.
It's Daisy from Pennan.
Somebody having their cards read, their
I think
fortune
so.
told, maybe?
Yes, I think so.
Taking the goods away by the barrow load.
That was the janitor.
The janitor of the school.
Mm-hmm. There's Mr. Garrick on the left, the headmaster. Mrs. Kennedy with the hat on.
And they all don't seem to
Yeah,
mind.
I'm standing in the door.
Well, that's
there,
you in the doorway, is
behind.
it? Uh-huh.
Yes, the first one.
None of them seem to mind having their pictures taken, did they?
No.
The helpers doing the washing up.
Miss Smith, that one of the teachers on the right having an ice cream. Nellie Trail, another old buddy.
Now, this is, thank you very much for that, this is film of Royal Cornhill Hospital Sports here in Aberdeen, again in the 1940s, although we're not sure which particular year. But interesting that patients and staff all took part in the fun and games, the patients not bothering to take their waistcoats or in some cases their collars and ties off, and interesting too to see the staff, the nurses, in their stiff aprons and their bonnets, fully dressed. Presumably matron wouldn't allow them to be anything less for the sports day. Royal Cornhill Hospital has an interesting history, Bernard. It wasn't always a hospital.
In fact, it started off as a hydropathic establishment, hydro being, of course, water, and water treatment was the thing 150, 200 years ago. And the hydropathic establishment, I think, went bankrupt because the fashion for treatment changed. And for a period, the set of buildings was used by George Washington Wilson, the famous Aberdeen Scottish photographer. And he had a developing studio in there. In those days, of course, glass plates. And apparently the broken glass plates, or the glass plates they didn't use, they just made big trenches and buried them all there. And I'm reliably informed that they're still there at the present day, if you could only find them. I think they be a fine treasure haul for somebody to discover.
In those days, Bernard, in the days of this film, it would have been known as an asylum.
Yes.
Now, asylum latterly had a kind of stigma attached to it,
Yes.
but not originally.
Yes, asylum really meant a friendly place where you could look after people. And you see, when asylum got this bad connotation, the other thing, of course, was the high walls. And I'm glad to say that Cornhill has now taken down the high walls.
Thank you very much indeed, Bernard. Well, after a short break, we're going to be recalling the summer of 1953 and having a conducted tour around Harrods, which used to be in Aberdeen's Rose Street and was well known far and wide for its woolens. There's also this week's competition still to come. That's in a couple of minutes. Now, they were times of severe austerity in the early 1950s. So when there was an opportunity for a big party, it was seized on enthusiastically. None more so than the coronation in 1953. And we've got proof of that in our next piece of film. And following on from that, there's a brief look round a factory that stood in Aberdeen's Rose Street until it was destroyed by fire a little over 20 years ago. That's in a film taken by Mary Deegan, who's here to explain what we're going to be seeing. Mary, what was your connection with Harrods and Rose Street?
Oh, I worked there from 1941 for about 40 years.
Did you really?
Yes.
And how did they react to you coming in with a camera saying, I want to
Oh, they were very
film what
good.
goes on?
Very good. Nobody objected.
Yeah.
Mm.
How did that come about? You were a member of the Aberdeen Cine
I
Club.
was, yes. And taking films, you know, weddings and things, and then decided I'd like to take a film of the factory. So that was what it was.
How did you get interested in it? What kind of things did you do with the Cine Club?
Well, I got interested in it at the beginning because I was in Scouts and went to the Jamboree in 1957 at Sutton Coldfield. But the club started, I think, about 1952, or maybe a bit before that.
Now, you still taking pictures, for instance?
No, not so much now.
But
Not
I
at
wonder
this
whether
video.
people are. I mean, perhaps not film, but certainly video.
Video.
But I wonder if there are video clubs which have taken the place of the old Cine Clubs.
Probably are.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's one in Aberdeen,
Yeah.
but there's certainly...
I must ask,
Yes.
Janet, let me ask you that. Have the Cine Clubs been replaced by video clubs?
Well, some of them have embraced video as a kind of a youngster, and they now work on both formats. But the old style Cine Club doesn't really have an existence as a video club as such. It tends to be community video or workshops that produce materials just on tape. But there's the rump of the old Cine Clubs. Some of them are still now working on film and with video as well.
Oh, really? Mary, we'll come to your film in just a moment. Janet, first of all, we've got this film of the coronation in Aberdour. One I would have thought of many that were taken at that time of this same occasion.
By the 50s, the cost of film and indeed cameras was reducing in relation to people's earning power. So the coronation is one event where lots more people had cameras and they were out and about recording it. So it's very typical.
And I would have thought that the Aberdour celebrations would have been very similar to those in small towns and boroughs all over the country.
Indeed, I'm sure we're going to see that.
Now, I took this, Janet, from the Perthshire Advertiser. It describes the occasion as an opportunity for wholehearted rejoicing by young and old. It said, despite the high cost of bunting and other materials, the streets and buildings were gaily decorated, and there was a host of entertainment for old people and children. Perhaps the highlight of the day for many was the television programme of the entire coronation ceremony, and this was made available to the old folk at a special showing in the Ayton Hall. Another feature, said the paper, was the crowning of the queens of various parts of the town, a colourful ceremony which was carried through with impressive pageantry and which struck a novel note so far as Aberdour was concerned. A memorable period of rejoicing also included a fireworks display, commemorative gifts for the children, and what was described as a free-for-all dance. Sounds like quite a day in Aberdour. The local bobby, presumably making sure all the arrangements were in hand.
And a lot of effort gone into decorating the town hall and the church and the borough as well by local people.
One of the things that I can confirm, Jerry, it was terribly, terribly cold for the time of the year. So in this film, you'll see a lot of people with raincoats on and perhaps even overcoats on.
In the early part of the summer, wasn't it, 1953?
Well, May, yes,
Yes.
May of 53, but very cold for the time of year. There was a whole new spirit about. You see, it was the first young queen since the time of Queen Victoria in 1837, and it was held to be a new Elizabethan age was going to be unleashed. And so everybody did look forward to it with great anticipation, actually.
A great deal of ceremonial, everybody in their fine finery and their uniforms, if they were appropriate. And of course, church services were very much part of the occasion, weren't they?
Yeah, and the kirking of the council and the various youth organisations and institutions that serve the community, they would all be going to the church parade.
The Red Cross, the Scouts, the Cubs, the Guides. I don't think we actually see it here, but I suspect there were an awful lot of people with cameras pointing out the thing, and it must have been shown in homes and in little gatherings for many months afterwards, as you said.
Yeah. And this, again, I think is very typical of the coronation, because of course coronations don't come round all that often, so it really would be a special event, perhaps once in a lifetime. But what was typical of the coronation in the 30s, and again in 1953, was the local children were given souvenirs of the day, and I think this is the coronation mug. Is it being handed out?
Well, at one time it was medals, but I think they got more democratic and gave out mugs. I don't think mugs lasted as long as medals somehow.
Yes, there's still a lot of 1953 coronation mugs on sideboards and display cabinets up and down the country. And I think I'm right in saying that the Perthshire Advertiser article also talked about a new children's playground opening in Auchterarder as part of the coronation celebrations.
I can see the weather there as well.
You can see the weather there. I mean, for June the 2nd, it's terribly cold. See all the coats
Yes.
on.
The collars up, yes, buttoned
Yes.
up to the neck.
Yes.
A fancy
And
dress parade, part of every celebration of its kind, wasn't it?
I dare say the coronation celebrations probably extended over a couple of days, and the fancy dress parade or the decorated floats procession is very, very typical of these kind of local community, local events, and a lot of effort gone into costumes, decorating the floats, and of course local traders offering the services of their lorries for the day.
There's one of the queens who was crowned. Now, Mary, this is your film, Knitting for Fashion, Harrods of Rose Street. Tell us about the situation, first of all.
Well, it was situated halfway up Rose Street, where once was Bridewell Prison, which spanned across Rose Street, and this was part of the building. Part of the wall of the prison was still standing there. And this is them taking the yarn in. It came in hanks, and it had to be wound onto bobbins to go onto the machines. And this is the girl winding the hank onto the bobbin.
Mostly female labour?
All female labour except for mechanics and jobs like that.
What would that have been? That looks like a kind of open factory floor.
Yes, this is the circular machines where you see the bobbins going round and the garments came out the bottom in a circle. There was no side seams to them, they were just all one. This is the fingering department. This is the girls, they got the palms and they picked up the stitches and knitted the fingers onto the gloves. And then this department is the girls sewing the body pieces together, you know, the sleeves in and the...
You made woolens of all kinds there?
All kinds, yes.
How many people would
Gloves,
it have employed?
Well, at one time, just after the war, we employed 400, but it dwindled down to about 200. This is one of Miss Conway's examining the garments before they were packed to go out. Nice pullovers, nice patterns. And Elsie Notman, she's packing them up, putting them into plastic bags. We sent goods all over the place.
Yes. What was it in those days that reduced the numbers from 400 to 200?
Automation. The circular machines and that. The glove department was not, of course, automated. This is the boys' hose.
In the time when...
They always said, you know, we would never have to do away with glove fingerers, but alas, we did, because the Japanese brought in an automatic machine which did the whole glove. And that then reduced the numbers drastically.
These were the socks that all schoolboys wore when they wore short trousers.
And the goods going out. We exported to South Africa, America, and France, Holland, Norway.
There'll be a lot of people, I suspect, who will remember their working days in Harrods of Rose Street.
Oh, indeed, yes. Grandmothers and aunties and cousins, and everywhere I go, when I say to, you know, people say, where do you work? And I said, Harrods. Oh, my auntie worked there, or my granny worked there. Or, so yes, it was a big, it was, I suppose, one of the main employment areas for young girls in those days.
Mary, thank you very much indeed.
Okay.
Well, so to this week's chance to win yourself a copy of this Pathy newsreel compilation video. It will go to the first two names picked from the correct entries that we received from you. First of all, watch this clip of Pathy News, this week from the year 1969.
They're push-button controlled, and there to be the first button pusher was Richard Marsh, Minister of Transport. The crossings, which also came into operation on the same day in Bristol, Lincoln and Reading, give the walker the OK with a visual indication. Making a safe crossing with the Minister was the Lord Mayor of Westminster. For blind pedestrians, there's an audible signal. For the motorist part, he is warned by a traffic light. When it flashes amber, he must give way. It looks like a good safety idea so long as both drivers and pedestrians keep to the rules of courtesy and caution.
And the two questions this week. What was that new type of pedestrian crossing called when it was introduced in 1969? And secondly, that year, 1969, the voting age was reduced to 18. How old did you have to be before that to be entitled to vote? The questions again, what was the name of that new type of pedestrian crossing that was introduced in 1969? And secondly, when the voting age was reduced to 18 in 1969, how old did you have to be before that to be entitled to vote? Your answers, please, to Competition 1969, The Way It Was, Grampian Television, Queen's Cross, Aberdeen, AB9 2XJ. And the answers to all the questions throughout the series will be given in a special programme which is going to be broadcast later. I'll be back next week with another competition and, of course, with more filmed glimpses into The Way It Was. Until then, goodbye.
And we'll be announcing the results of today's competition in 2 weeks' time on Grampian. In the meantime, you can join Jerry Davis at the slightly earlier time of 5:20 next week when we discover the golden days of railways.